Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good day, wherever you are. In our international community, our gathering, my name is Herb. Please join me in prayer and then about a minute of just collecting our thoughts. And then I'll come in and begin an introduction. So please join me in this preparation for the centering prayer experience. A prayer for spiritual intervention, a prayer asking for the gift of an open mind and an open heart. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my spiritual path, and my consciousness practice, and you, for an open mind and a new experience with myself, my spiritual path, my consciousness practice, and especially you. Please join me in prayer for serenity. God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Well, as I mentioned, my name is Herb, and I'll co-facilitate tonight. The other co-facilitator is Greg, and we're the team that has been asked by the retreat center, Mary and Joseph Retreat Center here in Palos Verdes, to facilitate a gathering on a twice-a-month basis, the second and the fourth Wednesday of the month. Originally, probably 6, 7, maybe longer years ago, we literally gathered at the retreat center. There were anywhere from 10 to 25 people on a regular basis. Since COVID, we converted to Zoom, and we'll stay on Zoom. Not only is it convenient for us and effective by 3 years experience now, it's also allowed an international gathering of people. We have 41 people on tonight, and we usually have anywhere from 30 to 60 people, depending on the season and the timing. So I'm glad to hear from everybody who wants to share tonight on their questions, their concerns, their comments, their understanding. We'll typically have a discussion of centering prayer, what to expect for those 20 minutes that are dedicated to silence of centering prayer. And then afterwards, we have a discussion of our experience and or additional questions or thoughts or comments that people want to make. Greg, I'm asking you to introduce yourself and speak in any way that you choose to, keeping in mind we're recording tonight. So I'd like it to be focused on centering prayer, the practice, and what we do for the 20 minutes. I'll come back and add some more, and then we'll have some discussion.
Okay, yeah. So during our 20 minutes, we're going to have basically a contemplative sit together. And basically the fundamental assumption of centering prayer is that there is a presence with a capital P. Different traditions have different words or different vocabulary for this. God is a very, very classic and traditional one. The divine presence, the Holy Spirit, various different traditions have different ways of articulating that which is in fact not articulatable. It's beyond words, but words is what we use to communicate with each other. So anyway, the fundamental and beginning assumption is that there is an other with a capital O. And we during that 20 minutes, receptively spend that time in that presence. It's an exercise in building a relationship. It's something that we say, well, we maybe during the 23 hours and 40 minutes of the rest of the day are preoccupied with the daily events of our lives, which are important and necessary. But what we do is we consciously choose to carve out every day a period of time when we notice and show up and are present with and are present to that gentle and unobtrusive other who is, in our experience, always with us, but sometimes not at the front of our own awareness. So we show up and we adopt a stance of quiet, wordless awareness of the divine presence. And so the thing is, what's going to happen during that 20 minutes is we sort of say, we open ourselves a little bit. We say, in a sense of trust, you're bigger than me. You know more than me. You have a view of the entire universe, past, present, and future. And yet there's an intimacy there and a love and a connection that I am stepping into and buying into and committing to. And we basically say, take me, metaphorically speaking, by the hand and guide me someplace that you know that I don't know. Take me forward, and I am willing to go forward with you. I trust and I'm willing to receive that, transformative energy in that gentle, tender, kind, intimate, and unobtrusive. And I kind of almost like to say sometimes my experience of the divine, there is almost, in a sense, a shyness there. I have to consciously invite and say, I'm here. I am interested in our relationship. I'm committed to our relationship. The divine presence, God, if you want to use that phrase, becomes an intimate component of our lives, but only as a function of time. This is a long-term play. I've been doing it for much of my life now, and I'm going to keep doing it for much of the rest of my life. So it's not an overnight thing. But so just in terms of pragmatics, during the 20 minutes, while we bring our awareness to the presence of God, quietly, without words, receptively, with no agenda of our own, allowing the divine to have effectively the agenda for that time together, guess what? Thoughts are going to happen. Distractions are going to happen. Daydreams are going to happen. Some grumpy argument you had with a family member or a work person is going to intrude on your mind. So what do you do then? Well, what we do, what Thomas Keating, who founded this practice, suggests is we just have a little simple word that we pick, maybe a 1 or 2 syllable little word, and we just use that word a few times. We just say that word. And what that word does is it takes our kind of, if you will, synaptic network that's lit up like a Christmas tree with distractions and thoughts. That word just gentles us. It kind of quietens, the distractions and the hubbub of our minds as attempting to struggle to process whatever it's trying to deal with. So we say that word a few times and we use that as a tool to reconnect with, reestablish, and recommit to being present right now to the divine. And before you know it, Herb's going to ring the bell and the 20 minutes will have been gone. In my experience, sometimes those 20 minutes feel like 2 minutes. I'm startled when the bell goes off. Sometimes the 20 minutes seems like 3 hours, and I'm just wondering, when will it ever be over? So it just varies. It varies completely from sit to sit. If you've been doing it not too long or a long time, same experience. And one last thing I will say, and then I'll turn it back over to Herb. A couple of weeks ago, in my opinion, a wonderful question was asked by one of the people who joined us in our community here. And it was, gosh, when I'm sitting, there are just so many thoughts that encroach what's the deal with that? And you know what? I kind of stumbled and bumbled and tried to answer, came up with some like meaningless happy talk, I'm afraid, at the time. But I continued to reflect on that guy's question. And I thought finally, you know what? Centering prayer is a practice. We practice centering prayer. If you were retired and decide you wanted to learn the piano and you've done it for 2 or 3 months, well, do you think you would be a concert pianist? Not quite, you know? You've got to commit to a practice. You'll grow in the practice in months and years. So, and centering prayer is like learning to paint watercolor or play the piano or whatever it is. It's something that you grow into in your inner being through practice. There's this meme on the internet that you might consider a little discouraging. It says, to achieve true mastery takes 10,000 hours of committed practice. Not sure I could add up and say I've done 10,000 hours of committed practice of centering prayer, but I've been doing it for a while. And I think I'm now an advanced beginner. You know, so the point being, we can give ourselves permission to realize it's an ongoing thing that we grow into over time. And, you know, if it's not going quite the way you want it or according to your expectations, well, geez, I'd suggest letting go of those expectations and let it unfold and develop as it will in your life. And most of us who've done it for a while will say it's turned out well. Even if you can't tell in that given 20 minutes what happened, if anything, you look back over your shoulder after a while and you realize, you know what? My life has actually changed. And this is a common experience with people that commit to the practice. And, you know, final point, I hope that's not my fourth final point, but when I was a young guy, I was one of these people who really was looking for some spiritual answers. I felt lost. I felt a great sense of longing. I didn't know where to turn or where to look. And that remained a kind of a constant in my life until probably 15, 20 years ago when centering prayer was, you know, the next thing to try, quote unquote. And guess what? That was the door that was not locked for me. That was the door that allowed me to finally find that which I had been somehow longing for. This, at least for me, was that door that opened and allowed me to find a path forward into that connection with that which I was longing for at the most inner part of my being. So everybody's different. Nobody necessarily other than me would have that experience, but perhaps for some other people, centering prayer might just be that thing that clicks with what you've been searching for. So
Wonderful. Thanks, Greg, very much. And to remind people who are here perhaps for the first time and or are listening to the recording, the primer for this practice was written by the originator of the practice, Father Thomas Keating. Open Mind, Open Heart is the name of the book. Open Mind, Open Heart. And if you have an interest in the practice, as Greg wonderfully emphasized, the practice, then certainly read the book and see if that feeds your interest and your capability of doing it. The key, and thank you, Greg, so much. Wonderful perspective and context. It's called the centering prayer, and the centering is really excellent. The prayer, not so much. It's a misnomer, actually, because this isn't prayer, as I understand prayer. Prayer is when we're in intentional relationship, speaking to or directing our attention to or our feelings about, perhaps verbalizing it out loud or quietly in our intention. Prayer is when we're talking to God, whatever that presence is, that you're here to foster a relationship with. The key here is a relationship. This isn't prayer. It's also not meditation. Meditation in the classic sense in the dictionary. In the dictionary, meditation is directed thinking, the use of the mind to think and to reflect deeply. A wonderful practice. But this is not that. This is an attempt by Father Thomas Keating to take the contemplative practice out of the monastery into the public forum of not religious necessarily, certainly not people who are not committed to a religious order or something like that, but they're just ordinary human beings like ourselves who may have an interest either because of a religious connection or maybe despite a religious connection to some type of spiritual awakening and experience. So he brought the contemplative practice, which comes from the Latin templare, meaning temple space. The space, the cathedral, the church, the chapel, the synagogue, the tabernacle, the mosque, the house of God. And Greg started out by talking about the underlying assumption that there is this presence, not specialty or uniquely in a place, but in our own heart, and deep in our own being, a presence that we foster a relationship with. The two words that Father Keating uses is to acknowledge that presence and then to consent. Those are the two words. Acknowledge the presence and consent to the presence. Well, what are we consenting to? Greg used a word that was a gift to me early on in our co-facilitating experience, and that was receptive. To be receptive of the impact of the presence for the purpose of transformation. I'm going to sit in the presence, hoping for and expecting change. A radical change in me by just being in that presence. And I'm attempting to be aware of that presence with an open mind and an open heart. Transformation. It's a big word, transformation. Think in terms of the metamorphosis of a monarch butterfly. From the worm to the chrysalis to the outstanding monarch butterfly. That's a process of patience and radical change. And Greg talked about that. You won't see it today and you won't feel it tomorrow. But a year from now, when you look back over your shoulder, you'll go, oh, I'm a better human being today than I was. Maybe there's a correlation. I didn't know it and I didn't feel it, but now I observe it. Father Keating was very clear. There's only two mistakes that you can make. One is not show up, and the other is to leave early. I love the simplicity. He said, everything in between is none of our business. We make the effort, the results we can observe. It's not about knowing, and it's not about feeling, and it's certainly not about controlling. And again, another word that Greg introduced a long time ago and keeps echoing wonderfully to remind us is that it's a very gentle process. And for the perfectionists among us, whatever you do is good enough. And I can hear people internally arguing, but you don't understand. Oh, I do, absolutely. Whatever we do is absolutely good enough. Now, it'll be better tomorrow by our standards, but it's good enough for today. I'm going to stop with this one quote from somebody who was in one of my workshops who gave me a whole new concept that I'm currently attempting to unpack because it was so powerful. Perhaps God is oxygen, and we live in and survive in and breathe in and are inundated by oxygen. And to the extent that we breathe in and out, we're breathing in and out the life of God. We're as plugged into God as we are to oxygen. It's a very powerful image. And I don't mean to be scientific, and I certainly don't mean to be theological. I really mean to be poetic. To give us a sense of, oh, isn't it interesting? The word spirit comes from the Greek word breath, spiros. Spiros, breath, the breath of God. And you'll hear us and some of us talk about it that way sometimes. And we'll spend the next 10, 15 minutes having some dialogue. Once we're through with the dialogue, we'll go have our 20-minute silent sit, and then we'll have some more dialogue after that.
Hi, Herb. I have a question. During the centering, do you focus your attention on any part of your body?
No. This is not about meditation. This is not about a discipline for feelings and or health and or relationships with other people. This is a process of merely but of conscious awareness of the presence. And the word I embrace and the word I focus on, if I have any distraction, is consent. I'm consenting, inviting the spirit to have its way with me. So there's no focus other than the awareness of that presence. And if it sounds ambiguous, it always will be.
Okay. What I'd like to share is, it's so interesting when you get into thinking about it. All these ideas and questions come up, but really the only thing we're asked to do is first give our permission to have whatever needs to be done to remove the blocks to the light or God or however you want to put it. That's the only thing we're asking for. And on our own part, the only thing we need to do is to be receptive. And for me, that's really important, because when my sits do not feel like they were, I don't know, just they didn't feel significant. When I review what I need to do, if I've consented and if I've been receptive, whatever happens is not my business, so that's what I have to offer.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, because you pressed a button in me about light and darkness. It's a wonderful metaphor that really helps me in the morning. I have my coffee first. I get biologically comfortable before I ever attempt to be conscious. And the light and the darkness is really a very helpful image for me to know that I'm coming from my humanity filled with darkness and shadows, and that I'm sitting in the presence of light to diminish the darkness. That's it. That's it. And it's kind of like a dimmer switch. Those of you who have been around me for any length of time know I use that regularly for the spiritual journey. That dimmer switch, not a light switch. No, nothing goes boom, or not usually anyway. But that dimmer switch, just a tiny little glimmer of improvement each day. So subtle that I'm not even aware of it until the accumulated effect lights it up enough for me to go, oh. And then I'm surprised. And it continues.
When you were talking about light and darkness, and I was thinking of something about how the abundance of light is produced in the presence and challenge of darkness. And it just resonated so much. I love the use of the words of the lightness and the darkness.
Yeah.
And there's just so much hope having done the centering prayer regularly. And I was just thinking today, what am I finding or feeling more of? And it is a sense of well-being, a sense of okayness. And after I do my centering prayer and I ask God to direct my day, and I found that I went out and behaved in such a way that was totally contrary in the way I was reacting with people, or lack of kindness in certain ways. So, but it really, I apologized. At least I recognize it now, or instead of just bombastically, charging away.
Well, that's the kind of awareness of a change that reinforces the power of this process. And you've reminded me of a definition that I heard that was so simple that it's worth repeating, and that is, darkness is the absence of light.
I have a technical question.
Yes.
Where does meditation come in with this centering prayer?
Yeah.
Do you do it at different times? Do you do them together?
Yeah, it's a really good question, at least as I understand it. And I don't mean to self-promote. I have written a book on the whole concept of consciousness, which is called Practicing the Here and Now. And so I've made these distinctions. These are distinctions that have helped me. They're not scientific, they're not theological, they're not philosophical. There's nothing other than this is my understanding. And that is, prayers when I'm talking to God. And I spend a few minutes sort of warming up for the consciousness practice. Meditation is the directed thinking that I'm looking for guidance. And I spend 5 or 10 minutes in my morning sit, praying first, opening up my heart and mind, and then watching my thinking, meditating, directed thinking, looking for guidance, and then intentionally starting my centering prayer practice. This is just my practice. And so I pray, talking to God. I meditate, listening to the response and the guidance, and then going kind of silent, or at least that's my intent, to sit in the contemplative practice for anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. I'm retired and I have the time now. To be in that presence, to be transformed. And then I close, very much like we close here, with a prayer to carry me into the day.
So you do them together?
I do them together, yes. Now, that's my morning practice. I have an afternoon or evening practice, which is pretty much only the centering prayer. Much shorter, usually, because I'm much more tired by the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Thank you. I think it's an excellent question because it kind of frames it. It's not a model. I'm not putting it up as a model. I'm responding to your question as to what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, because I thought I would have to quit my job and be praying and centering and meditating all day long.
Yes, exactly. No, please hear this. We do what we can. We do what we will do. And although the recommended sit is 20 minutes, I'm very clear in giving people the direction. If you're interested in having a consistent practice, try 1 minute. 1 minute, not of prayer, not of meditating, not of writing, not of reading. 1 minute of intentional consciousness. 1 minute of awareness of the presence of God. Set a timer so that you know when to begin and when to end, and you're not worried about the time. 1 minute. If you do that for 30 days in a row, you will establish a practice.
That's beautiful. Good. Thank you.
Well, the pushback I get from people, oh, 1 minute, that's just not enough. I said, well, it's one more minute than you're doing right now. Greg, would you like to give us some comments of anything that you've thought during the time we've been speaking? And then we'll go into our 20-minute sit.
Yeah, one thing that really has started to resonate with me personally, I kind of was beginning to grapple with this last time. Centering prayer is, in fact, a profoundly realistic practice. I mean, Father Keating is very, very in touch with the full reality of what it means to be a human being, good, bad, and ugly, to quote the old Clint Eastwood cowboy movie, good, bad, and ugly. And the fact is, it's our lives. My personal life has had ups and downs, and the practice has been a constant. Just a quick little personal anecdote. My mom is now passed, but when she was getting quite old and sick and needy, it fell to me and my wife to take care of her and provide for her financially. And at the time, I had no idea where that money was going to come. I thought my life was going to end up being a car crash. I didn't have any concept of how this could possibly work out. I was convinced it wasn't, and the only question was how the crash would happen. So the practice was the constant. And what happened, Father Keating says, there are times when your life feels impossible, and the practice can still be a key foundation of your life, even in those times when you don't know how things are going to turn out. So I will say there was a profound and transformative grace in my mother's life as it came to a close. And it was just a whole startling, radically unexpected thing. Herb has said, God is a consciousness greater than ours, and we find ourselves surprised by where we're being taken. That journey with my mother ended in a place of next level grace that I had no possible understanding was out there waiting. But the thing is, the practice was the constant. And so if your life is in a gentle place or a challenging place, it'll be gentle at times and challenging at times, guaranteed, because we're human beings. The reality is something that this practice is fully in touch with. So sometimes I feel like maybe there's a little bit of cosmetic happy talk that you hear from me, but I just wanted to say there are times when this is a bedrock practice that goes to the core of our lives and our being.
Bedrock practice. That's a mantra. All right. So I'd like to invite you now to get comfortable. That was a very key word from Father Keating, to be comfortable. If you're sitting in a chair, relax. Have your feet on the floor, your hands and arms on the arms of the chair, and perhaps a spine that's straight but not rigid. Breathing in and breathing out gently and calmly and rhythmically. Breathing in the light and breathing out the darkness. Breathing in the presence and breathing out the distraction. Breathing in the power and breathing out the lack of power, the self. And join me in this prayer of consent. God, I offer myself to you, to build with me and to do with me as you wish. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do your will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of your power, your love, and your way of life. May I do your will always. I'm going to pray a psalm. I'll pause, and then you can pray it if you choose to, out loud or quietly. You're on mute. And then I'll pray it again, but drop a word or a phrase and pause until, in fact, after we go back and forth, the prayer will disappear and the bell will ring 3 times to signal the 20 minutes of silence, and then once to signal the end of the silence. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still. Be. Please join me in prayer for transformation. This is a version of the St. Francis prayer. God, make me a channel of your peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to this life, this very life. Amen. So that was our sit, and it was good enough. So now I invite you, anybody who has a question and or a comment or anything that they would like to share, especially an experience during this time or previously, to make those comments or ask those questions.
Hi, Herb.
Hi.
A lot came up. I'm really emotional because I'm uncomfortable and I'm growing and I'm uncomfortable. And I do centering prayer, right? My version of it. I don't know if I'm doing it right or wrong. It doesn't matter. 5 minutes a day.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's, because you guided us, I really felt like I say the word in Spanish, me entrego, which is mean. I just keep going. I surrender. I surrender. Like it's more than surrender. It's sort of like I hand myself over to you.
Yeah.
And, but tonight, and it has happened before on Wednesdays, I really sat with just feel the presence of God. And, I started crying because I guess I could feel it, or even in just my surrender to it was like an overwhelming, in a good way, awe-inspiring thing. And it reminded me of how you say, and well, I'll just go with the thought, either God is or God isn't. And that seems irrational to me. Like, I can't just do that. And yet, from the Tuesday night workshop, it's you act as if. And it's very hard to act as if, because where is God? Where I can't touch it. I can't do, but this, I could see how centering prayer can help. The practice of it can help me tap into the presence that would allow me to go, okay, I choose to believe God is. And because I can feel it, even if it's, tiny bit more than I normally can. And then the last two thoughts that I had was, my original gods were my parents. You know what I mean?
Right.
I could touch them. I could see them.
Yeah.
They were flawed, but they were there. And it's part of my work now is to divorce those gods from God. And it brings up a lot of grief and like whatever. And then the last thing I'll say is that my new desire is to be the woman I am when I travel. And that woman, and I travel internationally, right? So from the moment I get on the plane, I know I have no power. It's an illusion, but it works. Like, I'm in a foreign country. I can't even have judgments because I don't know I know nothing. I'm open and I'm fully aware from the taxi to exchanging the money to the strangers that help me. I have zero power. When I get on a plane to come home, I'm always crying in gratitude because I'm fully aware. Where here, I have the illusion that I have, from the minute I wake up, I got to make this happen. And it's exhausting. And anyway, that really struck. All of those pieces were coming together while I was realizing and being very emotional about the possibility of being.
See how conscious we become when we intend to become conscious. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And by the way, faith is totally irrational. You said it's irrational. God is or God isn't. What is your choice? Yes, faith is totally irrational. There's no certitude. There's no knowledge. There's no feeling. It's a leap into the abyss. Absolutely.
And it's terrifying, right?
Well,
it is right now.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we learn to navigate the abyss. That's a line from my own spiritual director. And most of us need, and you said it, I'm so glad that you said it that way. I'm going to amplify it. Most people have, unbeknownst to themselves, conscious or unconscious, acquired a concept of God from their family or from their environment, the power of a superior human being. And unfortunately, we project that onto what God is, just a superhuman being. And that's why we say God is sad or God is happy. I understand it. It's just not possible. Yeah. And so my invitation to everybody that I encounter is get a God upgrade. Get a God upgrade. Be open to having a brand new experience of a fill in the blank.
I'm going to be so boring about it. And everyone's shares tonight have really been helpful. I've been here however many times, and I've heard a lot of new things tonight. So it's been a great experience in that regard alone. But for me, a lot is changing, and, I sound like a broken record, but the judgment is such a huge part of my life. And when I come in this room, it's the one place where I feel like I can be, just to be is enough. And for me, that's what keeps me coming back, and the things that I need to hear, the need for a God upgrade, right? Because I have a problem. I have a big problem. I have a built-in forgetter and a built-in fake sense of control that I like. When she said, I wake up and I'm like, okay, I've got to make this happen. I'm just in constant gotta make this happen mode. And it's like, it's every second and fourth Wednesday for like an hour and a half. I finally feel like I don't have to make it happen. Just that alone for me is, what I take away. And tonight I needed it more than ever. So that's my experience this evening.
I was just listening to everyone here and thinking, and my comment or thought was on that's exactly why I started the practice of centering prayer, or what led me here 4 years ago or whenever it was because I'm always just going. There's never a respite. And I was a little bit late tonight, but caught a little bit of the tail end about on Greg talking about the implementing a practice and just committing to the practice. And, I don't know, I was just thinking about the paradox of powerlessness, and yet I have so much power. I actually really, I'm powerless, but this thing that I'm sitting with every day is all powerful. And he resides inside, and and we're talking about the light, and it's whatever I choose. And if I choose to sit in the presence of the power that's within me, and but I have to maintain a practice to access that power. And it's like, and I'm still powerless, but it doesn't seem, the things don't seem to weigh. And I'm sitting here right now and I'm like, what is this noise in the background? And I'm getting this email from this lady in accounting asking about one of my clients and why they're past due. And I'm like, I'm noticing the reaction of myself now compared to the reaction of the amount of anger, the amount of resentment that's welling up in me now compared to the amount of resentment that would have welled up in me 4 years ago is negligible. And now I'm kind of laughing, and I probably won't even respond until tomorrow. And to me, that's a measure of the I don't know, my access to the power within.
Yeah, might even be called serenity.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I don't know. That's it. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, as you're well aware, I've been totally shocked and surprised by this whole business of discovering that there's something more than, well, than I ever thought that there was. And my experience has been, one, the discovery of this spirit of the universe that resides everywhere. And that's the second thing. First, it exists. Two, it's everywhere. It's everywhere I look now. So maybe that's just having the right kind of eyes. Maybe that's beginning to enter into some sort of a relationship. The third thing that's come to mind for me is, don't try and quantify it. Don't try and determine the limits of its power. Don't try and think about its nature, because every time I did that, it was just a bad thing to do. For one reason or another, just a bad thing to do. And discovering that it's everywhere. First it was, well, I'm seeing that there's a spiritual aspect to this and that and some other thing. Man, it's like everywhere. It's everywhere. And I can't wait to have a closer relationship with whatever this is. That's my comments for the evening.
My practice is really inconsistent. And one of the things I was noticing as I was listening today was how these principles that you're talking about with the centering prayer, just like everything else, are relevant to everything else. I'm struggling to keep a regular practice with my physical therapy, and it's the same thing. It's almost exactly the same thing. It's just my body instead of my spirit.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of, I'm afraid I missed the first few minutes too, so I don't know if you guys said, well, wait a minute. The thing about the practice too that struck me was when you're talking about a minute a day for 30 days, thinking about it like that the amount of time isn't as important as, at least when you're starting out at any rate, the amount of time is not as important as just that regular practice.
Correct.
That keep coming back. Start small so you don't get overwhelmed. Because if we start small, we can keep coming back. If we make it too big, then it'll be a while before I come back.
That's right.
And so the other thing that I was reminded of that I've heard you and Greg talk about before is that gentle process of coming back.
Yeah.
And because when I sit down here, I get the mental version of what I call theater knees. When I sit down, in a theater, and the seats are tight and small, and I have a tall, long body, so I'm folded up in there, kind of like in the coach class airplane. And the first thing I want to do is stretch my knees. And so I sit down for centering prayer, and my brain does the same thing. As soon as I sit down with this intent to sit and be still, and then my mind starts trying to be 5 places at once. And so practicing being gentle about coming back, not, you idiot, you're supposed to be back doing this. No, just, oops, there I go again. Come on back.
That's nice, but gentle. Oops, there I go again.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad that, every once in a while you guys keep repeating that, and I'm glad it bears repeating.
It does. Mhm.
Because then with practice, I'm a little bit better at remembering to be gentle with myself that way, more so than I was before.
Thanks very much, sir. Absolutely wonderful. Yeah. Greg, would you like to make some comments before we conclude?
Yeah, I was just going to say what Bob said. I was going to try to keep my mouth shut for the rest of the meeting because I've talked a little bit this meeting, but what Bob said just was so right on. Personal experience, we all are different. Herb is a very different guy than I am. I'm a very traditional, if you will, Al-Anon person, raised by alcoholic family, and everybody around me was scary and threatening. I mean, I felt like a rabbit surrounded by wolves and bears. I mean, that's how I've lived my life. And what has slowly happened as a result of the practice, Bob was saying he sees the presence everywhere. This is really weird. I'm starting to get to the point where I see the presence in everyone too. I mean, the presence is saturating all of the people around us. They're not something to be afraid of. These are active examples of the presence of the divine in the people around us, even when we think they're being jerks or whatever they're being. So I mean, Bob really brought to mind the fact that I've got a different model of even the people I interact with as a result of this practice. And that for me, just personally, is one, I'm going to say, big ass deal.
Thanks, Greg, very much. Yeah. And I'm inviting you now to join me in the prayer for healing. Those of you in a 12-step program will recognize a version of the 7-step prayer, but it's a prayer that acknowledges that we're broken, we're deficient, and we go to the builder, the creator, to be rehabilitated. And we want to go out into the world to bring healing and being a conduit of healing into the world, like the prayer of St. Francis indicates, to be a channel. Please join me, my creator. I am now willing that you should have all of me, healthy and unhealthy. I pray that you now heal what stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my helpfulness to others. Grant me knowledge and strength as I go out from here to do your will by being in alignment with reality as it is. Amen. Thank you, everybody. See you in a couple weeks.